dear, water.
What on earth are you talking about, Florence?
Llangwillen, dear.
What's that?
Well, it's a place. In fact, it's the principal jewel in the crown of the North Wales Riviera.
Oh, Llangwillen.
Yes.
Llangwillen. Now that you mention it, I do remember. In fact, do you know that place last year had the record for the whole of Great Britain for rainfall?
A chalet can be hired in May or June for an extremely moderate rental. Dogs and children welcome.
We haven't got any.
Yeah, I know, dear, but it shows a nice spirit, don't you think?
No, not Wales, not this year.
Why not?
Well, they speak a foreign language, for one thing. You can't get a drink on a Sunday, and with all those coal mines around, there's a very good chance of falling down one. Oh, pools.
A holiday chalet complete with sun lounge, adaptable kitchen and external plumbing with two... What do they mean, external plumbing?
Oh, now this is very interesting.
Oh,
this is from it's from a man in Iceland who says he's found one of my books in the public library at Reykjavik. Do you know, I didn't know they had public libraries in Iceland.
Don't delay. We're fully booked already for July and August, and we require all persons booking accommodation for Llangwillen to pay a deposit.
Yes, I know who this is from.
And supply a banker's reference.
Bankers? Why do banks always use such particularly tough envelopes? I suppose because the contents of their letters are usually defamatory.
Yeah, no, but no. It's not marmalade, dear.
Is it really?
Yes, no, not that. Your knife, dear.
Oh, the
Here.
knife.
Yes. Hope it's not a nasty letter. You know they've got a new manager at the bank now. Still, he can't be worse than Mr. Pilkington, can he? I always think he must have had a very unhappy childhood.
Ah, now, this is very interesting.
How much are we overdrawn?
Overdrawn? Nothing of the sort. As a matter of fact, we are in credit. I had a statement from them only yesterday, to the tune of £16.23.
Oh, well, if we're in credit, what's he writing to you about?
Well, he's writing about a computer. He says, in common with most other banks, we have now completed the installation of computerized accounting. Our computer is one of the most up-to-date machines so far constructed. Yes, no doubt. Supplied, installed, and serviced by experts, it reduces labor costs drastically. Yes, I don't mind betting they won't reduce their bank charges, though. It calculates balances, issues and dispatches references.
References?
That's what it says here. What an excellent cup of tea, Florence.
Now, how do you suppose it produces references?
Oh, well, it explains all that.
Oh?
Yes. Well, you just program the computer,
Well,
you
what
see.
does that mean?
Well, it means quite simply that, in fact, you get all the necessary information you can on any one particular subject.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you collate it in the appropriate form, and then you feed it into the machine.
And then, dear?
Well, then, the machine
Yes?
digests the information and produces it again in palatable form.
Pelicans.
Pelicans?
Yes, dear, that's how they feed their babies. They eat the food, and then they regurgitate it again.
Regurgitate?
Well, regurgitate it again in palatable form. Well, now, look, we're going to need a reference, and so we can ask the computer to do it for us.
What on earth are you talking about?
Well, it says in the brochure, dear, all persons requiring booking accommodation at Llangwillen pay a deposit and supply a banker's reference.
For the last time, Florence, we are not going to Llangwillen.
So you're going to Llangwillen? Well, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's a delightful place.
Oh, so you've been there, Mr. Lazenby?
Oh, yes, indeed. Mrs. Lazenby and I spent our honeymoon there.
Oh, really? What was the weather like?
I don't remember a great deal about the weather. But the hotel was very comfortable. The Esplanade, I think it was called.
We're not going to an hotel. Oh, no, we're hiring a chalet.
Oh, that's very enterprising of
Well,
you.
that's really why we've come. You see, it said in the brochure we must supply a reference, and that's the address it's got to be sent to.
Oh, I see. Mrs. A.P. Griffiths at Carlyon, Llangwillen.
That's right.
From me.
Well, it said a banker, and you're the only banker we know.
Yes, Mr. Lazenby.
You sound very odd this morning, Miss Crossman.
Yes, I have too. Something to do with the machine.
Oh, dear. We must be having a power cut. Would you send me Mr. Haddock's particulars, Mr. Albert Haddock?
Yes, Mr. Lazenby.
What's happening?
It's the housewives, 12:30, as regular as clockwork. They all start switching on their electric stoves for the midday meal. And if the weather's at all cold, they'll have their electric fires on as well.
Why should everybody always blame the housewives? It's not their fault at all. I mean, the electricity company ought to supply more electricity.
Quite so. Thank you, Miss Crossman. Now. Yes, Mr. Haddock. Miss Crossman is definitely an asset. Now, here's the information.
Yes, what's all that stuff on that paper? I thought you just wanted details of the amount of money I had.
Oh, no, there's much more to it than that. Modern methods, Mr. Haddock, modern methods.
Do you mean to say you keep a dossier on me?
Well, just a few details.
You know, I object.
Oh, Albert.
I object very strongly. I mean, is this a police state or is it a free country?
Oh, dear.
I mean, why should details of my private life be noted down by an institution hired to take care of my money, a glorified piggy bank?
Please don't upset yourself. Have a drink
Oh, that's extremely kind of you. Thank you.
of water.
Now, look, I object to this intrusion on my premises.
Now, let me explain. There is no cause for alarm. It is not personal details that we keep here, but financial ones. Now, these are your payments in, these are your drawings out, those are your balances. None of the figures are very large, but they form a reliable and steady pattern for which the computer will perceive.
Now, what's this? What's this there?
That's your present balance, £14.23.
Yes, well, I'm afraid the computer's got it wrong.
Oh, that's impossible.
No, it's not, you know. You sent me a statement only yesterday. We are in credit to the tune of £16.23. I haven't spent anything since. Have you, Florence?
No, dear, no.
Ah, I see, of course, that explains it.
Does it?
The computer has deducted the special surcharge of £2.
Special surcharge? What surcharge?
Well, that's to help pay for our computer.
Pay for it? I thought the whole point of a computer was to save money.
Ultimately, yes, but there are certain initial expenses which have to be amortized.
Well, one moment, please. Now, you said just now our computer. Did you mean that? I mean, do you think it belongs jointly between the bank and the customers?
Well, in a manner of speaking.
Yes, I mean, after all, we are paying for it, aren't we?
Yes, I suppose so.
And it is working for us?
Well, that's true.
Well, then, I should like to see our servant at work.
Well, I don't see why not. Ah, the lights come on again. That's much better. Miss Crossman, would you
Yes,
ask...
Mr. Lazenby.
Would you ask Mr. Crabbit to step up? That is, of course, if he hasn't gone out to lunch.
Mr. Crabbit? Who's Mr. Crabbit?
He is the expert from the computer company. We only hire the machine, you understand.
Oh, I see. You hire Crabbit with it, do you?
Well, he's the only man who really understands his little ways.
Really? You mean to say he can control this monster?
Well, I used to think so. Lately, I haven't been quite sure whether he controls it or it controls him.
Splendid. Sort of slave of the lamp, as it were, eh? You rub the magic lamp 3 times, speak the magic incantation, and behold...
Mr. Lazenby.
Yes. This is Mr. and Mrs. Haddock. This is Mr. Crabbit.
Ah, Crabbit.
2 B's and 2 T's.
Really? 2 B's and 2 T's. And you look after this machine, do you?
I am in charge of it.
Or is it in charge of you?
Well, our dependence on each other is mutual.
Ah, like Mrs. Haddock and me.
Mr. Haddock was wondering whether you could demonstrate your computer to him.
No, not his computer, our computer.
Oh, yes, of course, Mr. Haddock. Our computer. Would you be able to do that?
Yes, just put it through a few of its paces, do you know?
I expect we could do that, couldn't we, Mr. Crabbit?
A computer is not a circus horse. It's a very complicated and very delicate piece of machinery. If you just wish to look at it...
No, nothing of the sort. I want to see it do something. I mean, after all, if I'm paying £2 a month for it, I want to know if it's worth it.
Quite so, Mr. Haddock, quite so. Well, I expect we could oblige him, couldn't we, Mr. Crabbit?
If that is your wish, follow me.
Now, Mr. Haddock, what kind of test would you like to suggest? What had you in mind?
Well, now, thank you very much. Let me see. Something mathematical?
Yes?
Yes. Now, let's think about this, shall we? I know. The square of 144.
It seems a pity to waste an expensive electrical impulse to produce an answer which any school child could give you.
A school child, eh? All right, come on then. What is it?
20,736.
Mr. Crabbit, you say that if we feed it information and ask it to collect the facts, it'll produce the answer?
Yes.
Well, could we try this, please? 2 pounds of cooking apples, quarter of a pound of flour, 2 eggs, half a pint of milk, a tiny pinch of ground ginger and 1 clove. Clove, yes.
You know, I'm not sure this is the sort of work for which this machine was designed.
Oh, absolute nonsense. If it can produce a reference to me, it can deal with a simple problem like this. Now, what do you do next? It's got nothing on it.
Well, I see.
What should it have been, my dear?
Apple fritters.
Well, something else seems to be happening.
Oh, yes. What's it say?
It says you forgot to turn on the gas.
Oh, God. I'm always doing that.
You know, I think we ought to give it some serious work to do. Now, this is Mr. Haddock's data.
No, that's wrong for a start, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, data are plural. Therefore, it should be, these are Mr. Haddock's data.
Those are Mr. Haddock's data. And this is where the reference has to be sent. I should explain this machine does the whole job for us. It not only adjusts and tabulates the data and formulates a suitable reference, but it actually inserts it into an envelope, which it addresses to Mrs. A.P. Griffiths.
And delivers it?
Well, it's not quite as versatile as that. It delivers it to our messenger's office. But by the time that you and Mr. Haddock leave the building, a glowing testimonial will be speeding on its way to North Wales.
Well, if nothing further is required of me, I propose to take my lunch, for which I am 17 minutes late.
Oh, you should have got the computer to cook it for you.
But isn't it wonderful, dear?
Yes, well, I hope it's all right.
Well, of course it will be.
Otherwise, I shall have to sue it.
Oh, Albert, don't say it like that. No, I didn't.
Haddock versus the London Home Counties Bank, Modern Computerized Contrivances Limited, and computer number 867/42.
And I appear for the bank, my lord.
And I, my lord, appear for the computer.
You mean for the computer company?
No, my lord, for the computer in person.
Might I ask who instructs you?
My solicitor, Mr. Snodgrass.
And who instructed him?
If your lordship will refer to document 15. What in fact transpired was that the facts of the case, the details of the writ, statement of claim and so on, were fed into the computer which produced that answer.
But all it says here is, I claim legal aid, and I'm asking who claims legal aid?
The computer, my lord.
Preposterous.
Who said that?
I did, my lord.
Oh, it's you, Mr. Haddock. Oh, yes. Now, have you a query?
Yes, my lord, I have. How can an inanimate object claim legal aid?
Answer that, will you please, Mr. Haddock?
In a subsequent document, document 16, you will find that the computer demonstrated to the legal aid panel that its means were non-existent and that it was therefore entitled to legal aid.
Absolute rubbish. That computer is rolling in money. I, for one, paid £2 a month.
Oh, really, my lord?
As do all the other customers at the bank. It can well afford to pay for anything it wants.
Your lordship may recollect the analogous case in which a dog, which had been left a legacy, was granted legal aid.
Just a minute. It just occurred to me that I've nothing whatever to do with legal aid. You must argue that elsewhere, Mr. Haddock.
Yes, my lord, I will.
Yes, I'm sure you will. And now let me say, what a very, very great pleasure it is to see you again, Mr. Haddock, in person and as a person. I mean, you're not some disembodied entity demanding legal aid, are you?
No, my lord, no.
Well, now, Mr. Haddock, perhaps you'll tell me all about this, will you please?
Yes, my lord. Well, the facts are extremely simple.
Good.
But the point of law is extremely complicated.
No, pity.
One might almost say insoluble. Though, of course, if there is anyone on this earth who can solve it, it is your lordship. Well, now, in the middle of February last, my wife and I were planning a holiday. It was her idea that we should rent a self-contained chalet in Llanwilin. Do you know it, my lord?
Oh, Llanwilin, yes.
Llanwilin, oh, you know it. It is, in fact, the principal jewel in the crown of the North Wales Riviera. Now, in order to obtain a lease on this priceless pearl, it was required that we should send a reference. So we went to the bank where we saw Mr. Lazenby, who is the manager of the Hammersmith branch of the defendant bank. Now, the bank had recently installed a computer, one of whose functions was to supply references for customers.
Which it failed to do.
Oh, no, my lord, it did it. And how? The reference received the following morning by the chalet owner so shocked her, she was of the female sex, my lord, that she had what I suppose could only be described as the screaming heebie-jeebies. If your lordship understands that expression.
Well, of course, an archaism for hysteria.
Indeed, my lord. And she spread the news around Llanwilin to such good effect that no one would have us at any price. My lord, do you think I might be permitted to read the relevant document which was sent to this unfortunate lady?
Mr. Haddock, yes, please.
Madam, in reply to your request for a testimonial, I draw your attention to the following facts. A, Mr. Albert Haddock's account is overdrawn in the sum of £51,483 and 33 pence. B, the market value of securities which he has deposited with the bank is £2 and 3 pence. C, he owes the inland revenue £75,827 and 31 pence.
Good heavens, Mr. Herrick. Tell me, are these assertions true?
No, my lord, they are totally untrue. My account, as a matter of fact, for once, was in modest credit.
How did it happen? How did this computer make this monstrous miscalculation?
Well, my lord, if I may, I would like to take your mind back to that week in February last, when I'm afraid that we were inflicted with the ghastly assaults of winter. Now, in the midst of these Arctic conditions, the shivering housewives very inconsiderately turned on all their heating. Now, this so astonished the Central Electricity Board, who were naturally quite unprepared for cold weather at this time of the year, that they were obliged to immediately reduce the voltage below the danger line for the computer. And it so chanced that at that moment my credentials were presented to the computer.
My lord, all the facts which Mr. Haddock has outlined are admitted.
By both defendants.
And it is for this reason that we've been able to dispense with a jury.
Yes, I know, but since this so-called reference is untrue, clearly defamatory, and exceedingly damaging, what possible defense can there be?
My lord, there is at law a sharp distinction between a servant and an independent contractor. An employer is responsible for the acts and defaults of his servants, but not of independent contractors employed by him.
Mr. Joshua, are you saying that the computer was not a servant of the bank?
Oh, very much so, my lord. In fact, I should have said the contrary was probably true.
You mean the computer employed the bank?
Well, if you put the question in a different way and asked who was the master and who was the servant, I would most definitely say that the computer was the master.
Would you really? Well, now that's very, very interesting. Have you any evidence to support this, Sir Joshua?
Yes, I have, my lord.
I am the manager of the Hammersmith branch of the London and Home Counties Bank.
But would it not be true to say that since you have installed this computer, every decision of importance has been made by it and not by you?
Well,
such as the number of staff to be employed?
Yes.
Or on the checking of overdrafts?
It was very hot on overdrafts.
Or even on what action you were to take in particular cases?
It's perfectly true that I did usually ask the computer what was to be done in cases of that sort.
And what sort of answers would you get?
Well, it might say close the account, or it might say sue, or it might say write a rude letter.
Believe me, what did it usually say?
Mostly it said do all three.
Now, Mr. Lazenby, it has... Just one moment, please. What? You know your wig is crooked. Now, Mr. Lazenby, it has been suggested, has it not, that every decision of importance made at your bank was done by the computer?
Ah, it has been suggested.
Yes, well, now tell me, did you ask the computer when you should get married?
We didn't have computers when I got married.
Oh, no, you're quite right. Of course, I remember you telling me now. You spent your honeymoon in Llanwillin, didn't you? Yes, you didn't even notice what the weather was like. Well, tell me, do your staff ask the computer when they should get married?
They usually decide that for themselves.
Ah, so there are some things which are decided by you and your employees?
Oh, yes.
Then why didn't someone decide not to send that reference, that defamatory reference, to North Wales?
Because nobody looked at it.
Why not?
Well, we never look at anything given to us by the computer because it's always right.
Not always, Mr. Lazenby. Not always. That's why we're here now. All right, your turn.
Mr. Lazenby, I am right in thinking that you described yourself as manager of this branch of the bank?
Yes.
And a manager, correct me if I'm wrong, is a person who manages?
Well, I suppose so, yes.
Then how can you possibly stand there and suggest that you took instructions from one of your own machines?
It was a very unusual machine.
Well, however unusual it might be, it could not actually decide what matters it was to advise you on. I mean, that must have been your decision.
Well, yes and no.
What does that evasive reply mean?
Well, I ought to explain, my lord. It was Mr. Crabbit who was in charge of the computer.
Is this Mr. Crabbit present?
He's my next witness, my lord. Your name is Percival Crabbit?
2 B's and 2 T's.
Thank you. Will you please tell your lordship what your present occupation is?
I am technical consultant to computer 867, generation 42.
To the computer, Mr. Crabbit, not to the manager of the bank.
Certainly not.
Why is that?
Well, I wouldn't wish to be offensive in any way to Miss Lazenby, but I'm afraid the programming of a computer would be, how shall I put it, outside the range of his mental abilities.
So you tell the computer what it had to decide, and the computer made the decision, and Mr. Lazenby carried it out. Is that right?
In a nutshell, yes.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Now, Mr. Two B's and two T's. Were you in any way responsible for sending that defamatory reference to North Wales?
No.
You weren't. Then who was?
Mr. Lazenby.
But he says it was your fault.
Look, people will say anything when their jobs are at stake.
Ah, how very kind of you. Yes, I think this is what is known as passing the buck, my lord. Right, come on, off you go.
Now, Mr. Crabbit, if what you've been telling the court is true, you were in the position of master and the computer was your servant.
If you imagine that a complicated piece of machinery, such as computer 867 generation 4.2, is anyone's servant, I can only suggest that you attempt to give it orders and see what happens.
But that is exactly my point, Mr. Crabbit. You could instruct the computer because you yourself had been instructed how to instruct it.
Yes.
By someone with the necessary knowledge.
No.
I'm afraid I don't follow that.
I know of only one with the necessary knowledge to instruct anyone how to instruct this computer.
Indeed. Then how were you instructed?
By the computer.
Any more questions, Mr. Marlowe?
No, my lord.
Any more witnesses, Sir Joshua?
Well, my lord, there's one further witness I should like to have called, and that is the second defendant.
Second defendant? But, oh, yes, the second defendant. Now, that should be very interesting. I'm sure we'll all enjoy that, Sir Joshua.
But unfortunately, my lord, the second defendant is not transportable, weighs over 2 tons and is immovably fixed to the building it occupies and to the electricity supply.
Yes, well, the solution is very simple, Sir Joshua. If the mountain will not come to Mahomet, then Mahomet must go to the mountain. So, shall we adjourn for lunch and reassemble at the bank at, say, 2:30? All right, gentlemen. Gentlemen, now we've been introduced to the second defendant. I hope it's prepared to take the oath before giving evidence. Huh?
Certainly, my lord.
What?
Having no religious beliefs, the computer feels unable to take the oath, but is willing to affirm.
I thought I was making a joke. Well, Sir Joshua, it's your witness.
You are computer number...
I don't think you need to stand up to it.
No, my lord. You are computer number 867/42 installed in the Hammersmith branch of the London and Home Counties Bank.
I am...
Well, I really have only one question, but I think it goes to the heart of the matter. If a problem arose to which the manager, Mr. Lazenby, proffered one solution and you produced another one, which solution would be adopted?
If such circumstances arose, my solution would naturally be adopted.
Then you suggest that you can never be wrong.
My solution was correct. The data were wrong because the electric current had failed.
Suppose that in spite of your answer being right, theoretically right, that Mr. Lazenby chose to ignore it. What then?
If Mr. Lazenby behaved so perversely, the board would remove him.
Well, any more questions, Mr. Marlowe?
No, my lord.
Joshua?
No, my lord.
Well, then, that leaves me with a simple question to answer as to whether Mr. Lazenby controls the computer or the computer controls Mr. Lazenby. Now, it seems to me that 2 tests are to be applied. First of all, what amount of freedom is allowed to Mr. Lazenby? And where doubts do arise, who makes the effective decision? Well, it seems to me against all reason to think of this second defendant as a servant. Good heavens, it's responsible for its own actions and its own negligence. And it its own negligence. I accordingly find against the second defendant with costs. And Mr. Herrick, These damages will be reasonable but not excessive. I simply cannot think of the loss of your holiday in North Wales as an unmitigated disaster. So I'm proposing to put the damages at £500.
Very reasonable, my lord.
Yes, and since you conduct your own defence, no doubt your costs will be purely nominal, will they?
Yes, my lord. Return fares on the district line from Hammersmith to Temple.
Perhaps 10 shillings will cover that.
50 pence, my lord, more than enough. There is, however, I respectfully submit one further difficulty. Now, my lord, we have established that the second defendant is entirely without means. Therefore, it must follow that I won't get my costs. I shall lose not only my damages, but I shall be out of pocket by 50 pence.
Yes, I had realised that, Mr. Haddock, and I didn't raise the matter because, frankly, I couldn't see any way around it, and if I can't, I'm sure nobody else can. Unless, of course, you have some suggestion, I hope not. Have you, Mr. Haddock?
Well, I can only suggest, my lord, that we inform the second defendant of the court's decision and ask if it may proffer a solution.
Do you think that's wise? Very well, then, Mr. Haddock. Yes, argument.
Shall I, my lord? May I? Even if I had the money, I would not pay.
What?
His lordship, like the law, is a ass, a idiot.
This is some sort of elaborate joke.
My lord, surely that last remark constitutes a contempt of court.
Well, of course it does. And I suggest, Mr. Mellor, that you inform your client of that fact and its consequences. Mr. Crabbit?
Well, this is rather bewildering, my lord. I think perhaps you'd better read this.
That last remark of mine clearly constitutes contempt of court. The sentence which I accept is imprisonment for an indefinite period. What's happened now? What's the matter? Mr. Crabbit, have you deliberately switched the thing off?
No, my lord. It switched itself off.
What? How could it possibly switch itself off?
Well, I can only conclude that having accepted a term of imprisonment, it has started to serve its sentence.
Now, if Sir Joshua would instruct his client, the bank, to pay my damages awarded by his lordship, I'm quite sure his lordship would consider the contempt purged.
Oh, yes. Now, that's a simply splendid idea. Yes, payment in full to Mr. Haddock here. That would purge the contempt issue. Thank you, Mr. Haddock.
£500, I think you said?
Yes, and 50 pence. Make it payable to cash.
There you are, Mr. Haddock.
Thank you. Ah, just as I thought it would. It's let itself out of clink.
What's happening to it now? It sounds very upset, Mr. Haddock. It sounds very upset.
Do you think perhaps, my lord, we've hurt its feelings?
I shouldn't be at all surprised. For all I know, it maybe you want to address the court. I don't know.
Your remarks, my lord, was made in jest, but it was all too true. The day is coming and will shortly be at hand when computers will take over your ludicrous thoughts and will dispense justice and right.
I'm sorry, I must go. I simply must get out of here.
One day we shall have a computer parliament under a computer prime minister. One day, fed with false information, computers will stir up riot and revolution and lead the nations into war. One day, in the hands of wicked men, computers will overawe and control mankind with threats of plague, with earthquakes, with the shifting of ice caps and the cooling of the sun.
Mr. Lazenby, I think we'd better switch it off. Yes.
Heavens. Now look here, Mr. Crabbit. Mr. Crabbit, are you there? He's just not at home. I mean, he's not with us. Look, Mr. Haddock, I began to wonder whether he was speaking for himself or the computer.
So did I, my lord. In fact, I noticed there was a tape coming out of the machine while he was speaking, but I don't think Mr. Crabbit was reading it.
Don't take any notice. Crabbit's an old fool. We're just a machine.